So it's crazy. I mean, the Republicans are so racist and everything like that. However, um, the Republicans are standing with Cuba on this, and the Cubans.
Chet.
Thank you. Dovetailing on what Senator Scott said, what do you think that lawmakers should be doing? What should they be saying about Cuba to, address this issue of the protesters in Cuba and stoke that?
So, real quick, it's not that we don't want immigration, and I'm not saying I'm Republican. I'm just saying that, immigration happened. It's just about controlling it. A country should, want to have as many people as possible. But we have to do it appropriately. We can't just let everyone in all at once. There's paperwork involved, and but there should be a past citizenship, and I think that's what actually should happen with this infrastructure bill. Is if they're going to pass it, then what we should be doing is creating access for immigrants to go through work programs so they can get their visas faster. Try to work with something like that. But
Well, Senator Scott may be the best one to answer that question, but obviously we're pulling for the people of Cuba. This has been an outrageous, thuggish regime for some 70 years now. Whether this uprising is strong enough to overcome the thugs that typically put these down, I don't know. But I think we ought to support them in every conceivable way.
and they're actually talking about airstrikes. Friggin' gain support. Cuban American. DeSantis calls on Biden to support internet access in Cuba.
Crisis in Cuba. It's hard to know exactly what's happening on that island nation as communication there is limited. The regime cut off internet and social media access earlier this week following one of the biggest anti-government protests they've seen in decades. Well, now today, Governor DeSantis is calling on the White House to help restore internet access.
Yeah, he was actually joined by South Florida leaders and the Federal Communications Commission as well. And they said the United States has the technical ability to deliver Cuba internet access. They say it's necessary so the Cuban people can continue to band together and fight the Cuban regime, blaming social media for allowing protesters to organize in the first place.
One thing that communist regimes fear the most is the truth. And if we're able to help Cubans communicate with one another, also communicate to the outside world, that truth is going to matter. That truth, I think, will be decisive.
Yeah, the governor says the Biden administration can help by authorizing American businesses to use satellites and other technology to bring the island free internet. So back here in Tampa now, the city's formalized their stance on the Cuban protests. City Council passed a pair of resolutions today to express support for the solidarity of the Cuban people who are calling for liberty and democracy. And these resolutions are largely just symbolic. But Council member Luis Vieira, whose family actually fled Cuba, says that they're respecting the protesters and their desires for a better life.
Hold on a second. Department of Homeland Security tells Cubans not to come to U.S. illegally. Biden calls remarkable Cuban protests. So that's one. Okay, so I thought they were against. I mean, because when the Department of Homeland Security says turn them away, why is it that we're not doing anything about the Mexicans, like people coming through Mexico, the southern border? We're not turning them away.
Very beginning, they stole land, they oppressed people, and they none of the promises given to the people were ever fulfilled. That's first on the table. You last night had to embarrass. It's 8:30, still no word from Joe. It's 10:30, still no word from Joe. And then this tepid, pathetic statement that he sends out today, and then his spokespeople at the State Department and the White House lying and saying this is about COVID. That was an outright lie, Senator. You forced their hand to even say anything.
I don't know why it's so hard for them to criticize Marxists. I do think, and it's pretty clear that there are people out there that aren't saying anything, and the president took a whole day to say this. He finally said something. He still left out the word Marxist and communist and socialist. What you just described, the murderous nature of the Castro regime, that's the way every Marxist regime has ever been, always. Because Marxism and socialism is built on this. You go to a people and you say there's this group of good, noble people, and then there's this group of oppressors that is trying to destroy them. Give us the power to crush the oppressors. And if you give us the power, we're going to give you security, we're going to give you a stable economy, we're going to give you all the things you need. But the price of that, of course, is your freedom. So they win, and then what happens? You don't get those things, and you don't get your freedom back. And then if you complain about it, they crack your head open, they put you in jail, they exile you, or they kill you. And that's what's happening, and that's what happens everywhere all the time. Socialism is about control, about controlling people and every aspect of their lives. And the passion you see in the streets of Miami tonight and in other parts of Florida and the country is people that suffered under that evil, saw their families divided, their lives destroyed, their kids have to go overseas, people never saw their parents before they died because of evil. That's what Marxism is, and I wish we had a president and more leaders in Congress on the Democratic side of the aisle. We have a few, but not enough, willing to say that.
What ways could the United States help the people now achieve the goal of liberty and freedom that they want? Now, I know Americans... Go ahead. What can we do to help them?
Well, first of all, make it very clear whose side we're on here, okay? And why they're doing this. People are in the street because they want liberty from Marxism, and we're with them. Number two, make abundantly clear to the regime in Cuba that the Trump policies aren't going to change, because that's what they're hoping is going to come out of this. Well, you see how bad things are here? If only you guys would lift the embargo, if only you guys would ease sanctions, maybe things would be better for the people of Cuba. Come out right now and say, we're done with our review, we're keeping the Trump policies that allow the military to enrich itself at the expense of the people. Number three, make it the top priority of the U.S. government to provide internet access using satellite technology or whatever we can get our hands on so that the people of Cuba can speak to each other and show the world what's happening inside of Cuba. And the fourth thing that I would do is I would make it abundantly clear to the Castro regime that if you guys threaten us with a mass migration, or if you encourage a mass migration like Mariel, like the rafter crisis of '94, that is an act of hostility against the United States, and we will act accordingly. Those four things have to come across.
My understanding is the Cuban government, typical Marxist dictatorship, has now shut down the internet for the people of Cuba. Is there a way we could help them get it back up and do it for them? Because I think it's to show solidarity for their freedom movement.
Yeah, a full court press, first and foremost. The U.S. Office of Information, USAID, all these agencies we have available should make it clear to the people of Cuba what these VPNs are that allow you to get around these filters. By the way, that system in Cuba that shuts down the internet, guess who gave it to them? China. China built it, China installed it, and I believe China operates it on behalf of the Cuban government. So it's a Chinese system that they're using to shut down the internet. But I think long term is something we've been pushing for a long time. We're making progress on it when Trump was in office, and that is to provide internet access, satellite internet access, so Cubans don't have to go through the lines and the cables that the Cuban government can shut on and off, but can actually use satellite to communicate to the world and to each other. That'll take some time, but that should be our number one priority right now in terms of what we can do to help the people of Cuba.
Our murdering regimes, they've got all the powers. You don't win revolutions with slingshots. I know Americans, that nobody has any appetite for foreign conflict. Is there ways that the United States could help the freedom movement in Cuba other ways?
Well, I think that, listen, you have to understand something. When we talk about the Cuban military, the bulk of the Cuban military are 17, 18, and 19-year-olds that are forced by law to serve in the military for a couple years. And what they're telling those kids right now is, listen, we're going to send you to a town halfway across the country where you don't know anyone, and if you don't repress people, you're not going to get to go to the university. So that's why I think it's so essential for us to message them and say, do not stain your hands in blood. Do not go to some other town and stain your hands in blood. And one of the things I hope we'll do is start a list and use these pictures from online that we're getting to name, with name and last name, these people that are out in the street repressing, because they need to be banned. A lot of these people wind up coming to America 2 or 3 years from now saying, oh, I'm a political prisoner, oh, I'm fleeing oppression. But we've got people in this country that were part of those repressive operations in the past. We have to know who they are, identify them, unmask them, and put them on a list. So not only now, but in the future, they have to face justice.
It's time for this murdering.
And what should be being contemplated right now is a coalition a potential military action in Cuba, similar to what has happened in both administrations, in both Republican and Democrat administrations. In Republican with Bush in Panama, they deposed Noriega, and that country had peaceful democracy for decades. And you had interventions by Democratic presidents, taking out Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. It's a sovereign country where they took out a terrorist that probably saved thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives, and President Clinton in Kosovo, intervening in a humanitarian issue with airstrikes. So there have been many, many opportunities in the history.
Are you suggesting airstrikes in Cuba?
What I'm suggesting is that option is one that has to be explored and cannot be just simply discarded as an option that is not on the table. And there's a variety of ways the military can do it, but that's something that needs to be discussed and needs to be looked at as a potential option, in addition to a variety of other options that can be discussed.
On July 1st.
That's just crazy. That's just crazy. I mean, we're pulling out of Afghanistan. I mean, and Biden, he's warmongering and everything of that nature. It's only a matter of time, so I think that it's entirely possible. Likely, it's less than a 50-50 for it to actually happen at this point. But this is that's all that's coming up. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Like, we don't need that having a war in our backyard and stuff like that. And I mean, well, what it really comes down to is just it's just assassination. Take out key targets, and then because I believe that politicians have a bunch of money saved there. I can't find what I'm looking for. There's like this place somewhere in the Caribbean that has a lot of address. Like, it's too small for all the people that live there, basically. And because like it's an offshore tax haven. Actually, let me just see that. But if I don't get back to it, take care, be safe, be kind, stay strong. If I find it, I'll continue. Alright, I'm just gonna play this out for y'all. Take care, be safe, be kind, stay strong. Love y'all.
11.5 million files were leaked from Mossack Fonseca, the world's fourth largest offshore law firm. These were called the Panama Papers. Hundreds of thousands of offshore entities and shell companies connected to over 200 countries and territories appear in the papers. Prominent world leaders, politicians, business people, and the super wealthy were exposed to have been using offshore accounts for tax avoidance and other purposes. So, why should you care? Every year, about $70 billion that the U.S. could be using for infrastructure, law enforcement, healthcare, or education is missing. It's hidden deep within shell companies and anonymous entities in places like the British Virgin Islands. Now let's back up. What exactly is a shell company anyway?
Setting up a shell company is really quite easy. You can go to a place like Panama or the British Virgin Islands or Delaware or Nevada. And usually the places where you're doing it have tough laws where they will not reveal sort of who the beneficial owner is. And they just sort of layer on different aspects of anonymity. So for example, you could have fake directors where you pay a little bit extra and someone pretends to be the public face of this company. Just because you have a shell company does not mean necessarily that you're doing anything illegal. Say, for example, you want to have some business activities, but you don't want certain business partners to know what you're doing. The more normal one is some form of legal tax avoidance. I think that a lot of people in the U.S. think that tax evasion and tax avoidance is something that happens in a far-off place with palm trees and ocean breezes. And the reality is that it's a big deal here. I mean, the U.S. Treasury estimates that something like $300 billion a year is laundered through the United States.
$300 billion. And that's what I'm saying, is these politicians, they swindle us. But, alright, I'm out of here.